Good morning, everyone. I'm Kay Wilson, and I'm the Maternity Commissioner for North Central London and the Programme Director for the Maternity Programme here in North Central London. We're absolutely delighted to have you join us at this webinar. We'd hoped to be able to hold this session face to face, but sadly, something called COVID got in the way of things, as it seems to have done for a few things. But thanks to technology, we've been able to share this important piece of work virtually. Before I go any further, I must give my huge thanks to Kaz Moran, who, as most of you know, provides the technical brains behind our team. Kaz has coordinated and led all of the admin for today, so many thanks, Kaz. Just as an introduction, Better Births was published back in February 2016, and it set out a vision for maternity services across England to be safer, more personalised, and more family friendly, where every woman has access to information that enables her to make informed decisions about care, both for her and her baby, and is centred on her individual needs and circumstances. And North Central London North Central London LMS is committed to transforming that vision to a reality. But before that vision can be realised, we need to understand the challenges that we face in our area. And in North Central London, some of these challenges are that people are living longer, but they're in poorer health. We have different ethnic groups with different health needs. There are high levels of homelessness and housing issues. Lifestyle choices put people at risk of ill health and early death. We have poor indicators of health for children, high rates of mental illness for adults and children, and differing levels of health and social care need. Multiple reports have demonstrated that outcomes for women living in and facing disadvantage are poor. And sometimes where solutions have been sought, they failed to get to the heart of the issues because the women and families living in these situations haven't been sufficiently involved. Now, at North Central London, back in the days when we were an early adopter, we recognised that if we were to make change happen, we needed to leave our assumptions behind and actively seek out feedback from the families accessing our maternity services. We were keen to engage with a greater diversity of women, including those whose views were not well represented by existing service user groups. And we were fortunate enough to come across Emily Ahmed, who, as many of you will know, is an expert in this field. And Emily developed and led a participatory action research project in North Central London. To improve representation, Emily recruited a diverse group of 15 women who'd recently used maternity services as patient and public voice partners. The group were trained in participatory appraisal, which is a community action research method, and over a 5-month period engaged with parents in order to gather their experiences of and their priorities in reshaping maternity services in North Central London. The research was carried out in the communities where the families lived, and it was done at children's centres, libraries, synagogues, churches, community centres and cafes. And it provided some key insights into the issues that these women and their families face. Some of them aren't particularly palatable. Lots of services are available, but they weren't always clear how to access them or whether they were entitled. Sometimes there was a long length of time taken getting through to people on the telephone, only then to be met by a language barrier or other barriers. Some women reported discrimination based on ethnicity. They noted that there were assumptions and stereotypes about women's ability to bear pain in labour,
There is some noise.
the children they would have. Please, could you make sure that you're on mute just for the presentation? Thank you. There was a noted lack of interpreters during labour, and this led to some women reporting that they felt vulnerable, invisible, or unable to communicate or complain. And obviously that is not something that we want to hear. There's also fragmented information with too many sources of information out there. And women also noted a lack. Excuse me, can somebody please check that we're all on mute? Thank you. There was also a note that women felt that they needed better access to the same midwife. Now, here in North Central London, We have 4 active maternity voice partnerships, MV, and they're comprised of women commissioners, midwives, doctors, other health professionals, charitable organisations, many different people working together to develop our local maternity care. But we must ensure that they are truly representative of the women and families we care for. In order to improve representation, we need to understand the ways in which women, particularly those living with multiple disadvantage, want to engage with our service and how we can support them to do so. And this is where birth companions come in. It has been an absolute privilege to work with Naomi, Kate and Kirsty, and I'm now going to hand over to Naomi to tell you more about the project. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Naomi.
Thanks so much, Kay. Hi, everyone. Really excited that you could join us today. And also a big thank you actually to Kay and Kaz and the team for their support and vision, I guess, in recognising how important this area of work is, and for supporting it for such a long time. In fact, going back even before Kay joined, when we worked with Julie Juliff, who was in that position before then. So I'm going to start by telling you a bit about Birth Companions. Apologies to those of you who know us well already. Just very quickly, we're a charity that was founded initially to work with pregnant women and new mums in Holloway Prison back in 1996. So actually it's going to be our silver anniversary next year, 25 years. Over the years, we've evolved to work both in prisons and in the community. And our work centres on the multiple disadvantages experienced by women throughout pregnancy, during birth and in their baby's first 2 years. Now, this period is increasingly referred to as the 1001 critical days. It's a period that lays the foundations for the long-term development and outcomes of children, and indeed of the adults that they then become. So our frontline services include antenatal education, one-to-one group and peer support programs, birth support and the provision of practical items. But what we also do is work to influence policy and practice as a means of improving the care provided to women. We recognise our frontline support, can't be extended across the country as much as we would like it, but putting efforts into research and policy and campaigning is a way of expanding our reach a lot more. We have a large lived experience team, and both they and our staff regularly commit to contributing to research, consultations and other projects to help shape work in maternity, but also in other systems, so criminal justice, family justice and immigration. We recognise that those systems are where you find a lot of women experiencing very complex social issues. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? So in terms of the background to the project that we're going to talk about today, North East London is Birth Companions' home, and over the last 4 years we've done a range of research projects in this area that underpin the work we're presenting today. Obviously, Kay has also mentioned the work that Emily Ahmed led, and that's also an important thing on which to base what we're talking about today. So all of the projects on this slide focused on the experiences of pregnant women and new mothers facing disadvantage, the care that they received, the challenges that they faced, and what could change to improve their experiences and outcomes and those of their babies. And you can read the reports on the projects detailed on this slide on the resources page of our website. We'll circulate that after the meeting, and I think my colleague is also going to paste those into the chat box now. Right, can we go to the next slide, please? So I thought it would just be helpful to outline some of the key findings that has cut across all of the work that we've done in this area so far. Firstly, the work of specialist midwives is a golden thread running through all the research. Specialist midwives provide unparalleled care where they're available. but the provision of specialist midwives for women experiencing complex social issues doesn't yet meet the increasing need in North East London. Secondly, women experience many challenges negotiating the multiple systems and agencies involved in their care. The greater the complexity in women's lives, usually the more people, agencies, stakeholders working with her. So effective multi-agency work is particularly important, and what we started to determine was that navigator roles could help with this. And I think my colleague Kirsty is going to say a bit more about that later on. Another finding was that the intersection with maternity and social services is particularly problematic. At one end of the spectrum, fear of social services involvement was preventing women disclosing issues such as mental ill health and domestic abuse. And then at the other end of the spectrum, women experiencing the removal of their babies into local authority care were not getting the support and care that they needed. And that was recognised very widely, especially by the midwives supporting them. Another finding was that engaging with women early and referring them to specialist services quickly can make a huge difference to the outcomes of women and their babies. Compassion and kindness. We found that an approach that is consistently compassionate and trauma-informed can provide meaningful continuity of care, even where continuity of carer is not available. Obviously, there's a huge amount of emphasis on continuity of carer, and that's fantastic, especially for this group of women. But where that's not available, continuity of care can also be found. And then finally, sophisticated and varied voluntary sector support is available in many areas in North East London. And working in tandem with maternity services, this partnership can really improve outcomes. But these services are not consistently available or used by maternity services. Right, I am now going to hand over to my colleague Kirsty, who's going to talk a little bit more about multiple disadvantage.
Thanks, Naomi. Hope everyone can hear me okay. So before we sort of get into the findings from the project that we did with North Central specifically, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the context of multiple disadvantage that all of this is rooted within. Some of you may have seen that the Royal College of Midwives yesterday published their first position statement on support for women facing multiple disadvantage. That's something that Birth Companions has been very pleased to help drive. It was sort of a direct outcome of the one of the projects that Naomi talked about a moment ago, called Holding It All Together, that we did in partnership with Birthrights, where we recommended more specific focus on this group from the Royal Colleges. And so it was, great to see the fruition of that yesterday, and I'd encourage everyone to have a look at that. We can again circulate a link to that after the presentation. We know from the research that Naomi's already talked about, from Emily Ahmed's work, but also from the work of many others, that women who do face multiple disadvantages, by which we at Birth Companions mean the co-occurrence of 3 or more complex factors in their lives, do experience poorer maternity care. There are inequities in the current provision of care for these women, so it's very much dependent on where you live, which trust you're in, and how teams are set up in your area. That there is extra support needed, and that really relationship-based care can make a huge amount of difference. And as Naomi mentioned, navigating care amidst such complexity can, either within one system, the maternity system, or across multiple systems at the same time, where you're dealing with housing, immigration, with mental health services, with social services, etc., is very, very difficult. And one of the things that we were very pleased to see in the Royal College of Midwives statement yesterday was their support for more work to explore navigator roles, to help maternity professionals women and other stakeholders to shape care based around trusted relationships for these women. We know that women in these situations are more likely to experience mental ill health. I think the impact of that is particularly starkly illustrated by the fact that the Embrace report for many years now has highlighted that suicide is the leading cause of death among women in the period of pregnancy, birth, and up to the year after giving birth. And we know that these women, amidst all of these difficulties, are less likely to be offered support and also less likely to be heard. And that's something that we'll be talking about as we go through today a little bit more. Returning to the Embrace report, the evidence there is incredibly strong that women are more likely to die in pregnancy and the year after birth if they are Black, if they are Asian, if they are from areas with high levels of deprivation, and also if they are known to social services already, which obviously represents a sort of very clear red flag in terms of the complexity of needs that those women may be experiencing currently or may have experienced in the past as well. But we also recognise that this is really a very positive window of opportunity. Sorry, I think someone might not be on me. There we go. This is a very positive window of opportunity. It's not all negative. We and many others working in this space consistently see that women are incredibly motivated and very engaged at this point in their lives. There's a huge appetite for making positive changes, for making lasting changes to their situations. And so the right support and the right recognition at this point can be life-changing on many fronts for the woman and also for her baby and her wider family. Despite all of that, very compelling evidence, I think we can all recognise that the concept of multiple disadvantages is quite a difficult one. It's also one that's not consistently or widely understood or applied across the maternity system at the moment, and that's something that we are hoping to be able to work with many others in the space to change. Before I move on, I think it's always worth pointing out that when we look at our impact each year at Birth Companions, we look at the needs and experiences of the women that we've worked with across our caseload. Last year, 40% of the women that we worked with were actually experiencing 5 or more complex issues in their lives at the time that we worked with them, which when you start to sort of translate that into a real concrete list of things, so be that housing, insecure immigration status, mental health issues, substance abuse, and domestic violence, for instance, you really start to understand what we're dealing with here and what these women are having to deal with, unfortunately, as well. The focus of this latest piece of work with North Central London was twofold, really. Firstly, we wanted to work with stakeholders across the local maternity system to understand how women's needs are currently being addressed. So what work is going on across the LMS, and how is that working? So we wanted to speak to the stakeholders leading that work themselves to get a handle on where things stand. And then the second strand of the work was our work with Maternity Voices partnerships to look at engagement and representation among these groups. And my colleague Kate will talk about that a little bit later. I just want to focus on the first section for a moment. So really, through a sort of series of phone interviews, and we'd hoped a sort of event to bring stakeholders together. That wasn't, as Kay said, to be possible in the end. We were looking at a number of things: how data was collected in terms of women's needs and experiences, and how that was used to inform service development, how teams currently working to respond to women's needs, any recent or planned changes around services for these women, what the biggest issues are in doing that work, and what works best in current provision, as well as opportunities to shape things through enhanced engagement and co-production. So we worked with some people who I imagine are on the call today, and we're very grateful for their input. And then Kate obviously worked with the lay chairs of the MVPs, and I'll let her say a bit more about that. COVID-19 has, as Kay mentioned, impacted hugely on this project, as it has on many areas. We were unable to complete some of the planned engagement. We are today battling on with Teams, and we've all been spending too much time on Zoom as well, instead of being in a room having conversations over tea and croissants. And also services have fundamentally shifted, and so all of that is worth bearing in mind as we talk through the findings today. I think the point that I would like to make is that, as well as obviously the practical challenges, the pandemic has really brought into incredibly sharp relief the disproportionate impact that health and social inequalities have on certain groups of people, particularly those living in deprived areas, people from Black and Asian communities, and I think addressing these inequalities as they impact on women while they access maternity care is now a more urgent piece of work than ever. So I'll hand on to Kate Chivers now, who is our engagement lead at Birth Companions, and she's going to talk about the work that she did with Maternity Voices Partnerships. Oh, sorry, Kate. I've skipped ahead to you. Sorry, I've slightly lost my order from juggling screen sharing and not having my notes. Sorry. Before Kate talks about the findings, I'm going to talk about the findings from the first part of the project, just briefly. We had a range of conversations and opportunities to kind of reflect on what we were hearing from across the local maternity system. Some of the key findings that we drew out that we've already shared with Kaz and Kay and others at North Central were that the level of dedication from staff across the LMS to try to do their absolute best for these women was incredible, and a real testament to the commitment that so many midwives and safeguarding specialists put into this. There's really widespread recognition of the complexity and the significance of women's needs, and the stakeholders sort of can see what specialist care delivers for these women, the differences that it makes. But they're also acutely aware of the fact that so many more would and could benefit from that care if only that was possible within the sort of resources and the structures of those services. There is a notable lack of clarity and consistency in terms of the range of factors that midwifery teams should be using to identify women's needs. So there isn't a really sort of clear or consistent definition of what contributes to women's experiences of disadvantages and how, and there's a sort of very different shape to how those needs are identified and responded to depending on the individual team within the LMS. And linked to that, there's a corresponding lack of data on the issues that women are experiencing, which makes it very difficult to shape services around really informed decisions based on prevalence and nature of need. So that's something that we'll talk about as we go through today. As Kay mentioned, the Maternity Transformation Programme, also the NHS Long-Term Plan, are offering real opportunities here. Obviously, much of that work has been fundamentally shifted by the pressures of the pandemic. But as we start to look forwards, there was a sense that there's need for more resource and more senior level buy-in to the opportunities that are presented in those papers to make a real difference for this group of women. Specialists in this area also express some frustration about not always being listened to when they are advocating for women's needs and trying to shape the services in the way that they feel they need to be shaped. And there were concerns about the ability to staff continuity teams and to protect midwives from burnout, which we're all very aware of, but absolutely need to be addressed in trying to do more work in this area. And there are concerns about interpreting services and language support and the barriers that those can present in trying to deliver the very best care to these women. Sorry, after that slightly off schedule section, I am going to now hand on to Kate to talk about the second part of the work that we did with MVPs.
Good morning, and thanks very much, Kirsty, and what a fantastic start to the webinar this morning. It's really lovely to see so many familiar names, if not seeing their faces here today. My name's Kate Chivers, and I'm the Engagement Manager at Birth Companions. I work across all of our services in the prison and the community, and I consult on all of our engagement work. And part of that is managing the lived experience team, which Kirsty and Naomi have mentioned earlier. So the lived experience team at Birth Companions began almost 3 years ago, and it grew from a lottery funded project on user engagement. It now has 40 members, or over 40 members I should say, and they are an incredible group of women to work with, all who have been supported by us and really wanted to give something back and be part of the work of Birth Companions. So the lived experience team offers opportunities for the women to influence maternity services through consultation and co-production. We work with commissioners and public bodies and voluntary organisations to ensure the voice of women facing multiple disadvantage is represented, and that's in policy, research, service and things like service development. And I'm going to be talking today about the work that we've done with Maternity Voice Partnerships in North Central, and to build the work that we did to build representation of women with lived experience of multiple disadvantage. I'm going to be talking for about the next 10 minutes or so, and I will talk about the work that we've completed, and I will finish with an overview of the key findings of the MVP part of this project. And please do put any questions or comments in the chat box, and I'm sure, or fingers crossed, we'll have some time at the end and we'll be able to answer any questions. Okay, so just thinking about starting at the beginning, about the work that we actually did. So for this project, I met, developed relationships and offered support to the 4 lay MVP chairs in North Central LMS. And that's the UCLH, Whittington, North Mids and the Royal Free. And I think I could see that everyone was present today, so it's great, great to see you here. So I attended MVP meetings and I took part in the 15 steps along with members of our lived experience team. So why was this work needed? So there was a lack of representation of women facing multiple disadvantage, which was consistent across all of the 4 MVPs. I think it's also fair to say that some of the MVPs were encountering some challenges due to kind of low numbers of service user engagement. So we worked with the 4 MVPs to build effective and sustainable input from and representation of women with lived experience of multiple disadvantage. So we supported the lay chairs to develop their practice, and that included working with the MVP chairs to provide training and support, and this was both on a one-to-one basis and also in a group-based setting. During the project, I was able to get to know the MVPs, which was an absolute pleasure, and speaking with them one-to-one to understand the challenges that they face, to identify and help support those challenges. And as this work continued, I found I was having really similar conversations with each of the MVP chairs. And so thought that it would be really useful to come together as a team so that we could share experiences and learning and to highlight some of the incredible best practice and to build a mutually supportive network. So this was an opportunity to deliver some training on effective engagement. So we facilitated a training day, which was to come together, but it was also to talk about trauma-informed approaches and principles of engagement. All of the MVPs at the start of this project were all at different stages in their journey. So it really felt crucial to offer that support, and particularly to ensure the newer MVPs felt part of a team and felt supported in their building their engagement work. Could I have the next slide, please, Kirsty? Thank you. So I'm going to be talking just very briefly a bit about the training that we delivered. At Birth Companions, we work in a trauma-informed way, and we have done for many years. This approach is really our ethos, and as such, it's part of everything that we do. So when we were faced with this new project, we looked at the development of it through a trauma-informed lens. To engage and support women who are facing multiple disadvantage during the perinatal period, we really felt that a trauma-informed approach needed to be taken. But what does this actually mean in practice? So trauma-informed means that we recognise trauma as an important element of women's experiences and recovery, and we seek to empower, build trust and meet her needs respectfully and safely. Women facing multiple disadvantage have often experienced some form of trauma or multiple traumas, and we know that the vulnerabilities linked to such traumas can be heightened in the perinatal period. So, by adopting a trauma-informed approach to engagement, you can support women to engage in a safe and a respectful way. And by carefully planning engagement, you can achieve the 5 core values of trauma-informed care. So I'm just going to outline those core values. So 1, safety, ensuring that the women feel emotionally and physically safe. 2, trustworthiness, clear expectations and boundaries. 3, choice, ensure that you're offering it. 4, collaboration, working together to make decisions. And 5, empowerment, ensure the women are empowered to attend and to take part. So one of the next questions was, well, what information do women need in order to engage with MVPs, to attend the meetings and to be involved in the events? And these are just some of the things that we discussed as part of the training. Thinking about how we ensure women feel safe and supported to engage. So when and where is a meeting? What's the purpose? And has this been really clearly communicated? Who's going to be there? What is the expectation? Will there be refreshments? Will travel be paid? This is particularly important as some women may not be able to attend if the travel isn't reimbursed on the day. Can I bring my baby? Some women just may not realise that this meeting is for them. However, if women are asked to attend, if concerns are highlighted, then this builds trust, trustworthiness and collaboration. And if women feel reassured, if there's an option to share experiences or thoughts in a safe, supportive environment, if you do what you say you're going to do, that's a really important one there. And then women are more likely to engage, and that engagement is more likely to be felt positively, and the women will feel empowered. Now, I think we can all relate in some way to the fact that we feel more confident when we have more information and when we know what's expected as much as possible. And then if you think about the barriers that women might face to attending, and by creating supportive engagement for women facing multiple disadvantage or multiple challenges, it will make the experience positive for everyone. So as well as helping to build the practice of the MVPs, we were working to establish new and improved ways for them to engage with women and to broaden the representation in their groups and establish forums that are safe and supportive for the women to share their views. Given the fact that the MVPs struggle to engage with women with these experiences, It was felt that the expertise that we've built up with our lived experience team was going to be a hugely valuable resource to draw upon. We didn't just want to help the groups make contact with women, we wanted to help embed the principles of engagement and co-production, and we did that as well via our training day. So throughout the project, we attended 6 MVP meetings across North Central NMS with members of our lived experience team, including, very exciting, MVP at UCLH, which was fantastic to be part of. We facilitated the involvement of LET members in the 15 Steps programme, and that was at the Whittington, UCLH and at North Middlesex. We were due to attend the 15 Steps at the Royal Free, but unfortunately, due to COVID, that wasn't able to go ahead. So what I wanted to do now was just to share some insights from a member of our lived experience team who completed the 15 Steps. And this is what she said. The opportunity to sit with maternity stakeholders and to be implementing real change is what drew me. I think it's always important to stress the aims of these meetings. I definitely felt like the 15 Steps was really welcoming. The only thing I would say was that directions to the hospital could be better. We did actually both get lost finding the place. And she said, I definitely felt it was an open forum and my opinions were taken in and the professionals seemed very willing to listen. Asking service users to complete the 15 Steps is positive. By asking the service users, you get to see things from both perspectives. It gives you valuable feedback that's sometimes missed. And as a professional, I believe sometimes the interests and aims are different to that of service users. I hope that by listening to the women's experiences, it can change the practices for the better, improve women's birthing experiences, and even support the staff by being able to understand the way that women think and improve post and prenatal care for women and babies. So thank you very much. That was feedback from one of our members who attended the 15 Steps at one of the hospitals. So supporting women to engage is vital. And this involves sharing the clear information in advance, and it also involves support before, during, and afterwards. And this wraparound support is just as important as creating a welcoming environment for meetings and events. And here is some feedback from a LET member about the wraparound support that we offer as part of our engagement work with birth companions. Birth companions always follow up after. So at the end of meetings, usually they do it via coffee. So you're in a more relaxed environment. That's optional, of course. They never pressure you if you don't feel like talking. Or during Corona, birth companions always follow up via email and or text, asking me about my thoughts, offering support or offering to call when I'm free to speak. Thanks again to the LET member for providing some feedback on the way that we work with our engagement. So unfortunately, we were unable to complete all of the work that we planned due to the pandemic. We were unable to continue work in the same way, but we were able to keep contact with MVP chairs through virtual meetings to continue to provide support and advice, and that was between April and June of this year. Could I have slide 3, the next one, please, Kirsty? Thank you. So what I want to do now is just talk a little bit about the key findings of this work. So it was clear very early on, as we started to make contact with the lay chairs, that the MVP chairs have not always been able to access training, and they don't always have the tools or the ongoing support with which to do their job as effectively as they would like to do. So bringing together the chairs for the training enabled them to solve challenges, to share best practice, and to benefit from that mutual ongoing peer support. And one brilliant outcome of their project is that this has led to more collaborative working within North Central, which is just fantastic to hear that this has led to that happening. Now, there are varying levels of engagement in the MVPs, and building trusted relationships with the hospitals, it is the key. Collaboration is vital to increase the awareness of the role of the MVP and to achieve the greatest impact. The collaboration will lead to increased awareness of and engagement with the MVPs. So every MVP that we work with was struggling to get meaningful engagement from women with lived experience of complex social factors. Now, engagement can be challenging, and it's so important to go out to the communities and to promote the work of the MVP in new and in creative ways. Engagement needs careful consideration, and in order to improve engagement, it's really important to think about and consider your approach. Running the 15 Steps programme with the participation of members of the Birth Companions Lived Experience team enabled MVPs to identify quick wins to improve the care offered to women experiencing multiple disadvantage. And that's what I want to just finish off the key findings. And I just wanted to say that for kind of hospital staff that are listening and for MVP chairs that are here today, there are really 3 key things that I wanted to highlight. Building relationships is key. Work collaboratively, and carefully planned engagement will benefit all of the women. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar, and I'm now going to pass back to Kirsty. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That was a really clear journey through the incredible amount of work that you've put in with many other people in recent months. So thank you. I just wanted to run through the recommendations that we at Birth Companions pulled out of this work. And as I said earlier, we've already shared these findings and these recommendations with North Central London, and we're already doing some work to explore where these recommendations will lead us. So it'd be very interesting to touch on some of these in the discussion if people have thoughts and responses to these. The first recommendation that cut across the work in both strands, working with stakeholders and the work that Kate did with MVPs, was the need for a shared definition of multiple disadvantage across the local maternity system, so everyone is clear on what multiple disadvantage is, how it manifests in different women's lives, how it impacts on their needs and experiences in terms of maternity care, and also how to respond to it. That's a big recommendation, a big ask. It's not something that exists in any local maternity systems, so far as we're aware. But it is work that is needed, and we're having conversations with a range of organisations who are looking at this at the moment, and know that North Central are very focused on it. Obviously, it needs some national view and input as well. So that's a big conversation that Birth Companions is really leading on in partnership with North Central London and others. And I think the work that I talked about earlier that has just come from the Royal College of Midwives is a really significant step in the right direction on that. Similarly, off the back of a better definition, we could then have better data to understand the scale of the needs and the nature of the needs that these women are experiencing, and how they impact on outcomes for women and for babies. There is an existing definition that could result in better data in the NICE guideline CG 110 on pregnancy with complex social factors. It's not as comprehensive as the definitions of multiple disadvantage that we use at Birth Companions. It doesn't include the full range of factors that we and many others believe need to be considered in that work. But as a minimum, I think it would be a helpful sort of interim step. And so that is something that we're working with North Central London to explore at the moment. Thirdly, a more targeted focus on specific groups who experience multiple disadvantage disproportionately, including Black women, Asian women, and women in other ethnic minority groups, would be beneficial. Also, those who are living in the most deprived areas, and those women who are known to social services. So all of those groups that are highlighted in terms of increased risk of mortality in the Embrace reports, but also whose experiences are highlighted in a host of other pieces of research, who have multiple barriers in their lives, multiple issues, would benefit on from a more targeted, specific model of working, and that might include, for instance, specific pathways built around the nature of those needs. We've also recommended that there is further support and investment in the Maternity Voices partnerships, as Kate has talked about. I think even in a relatively short period of time, and working from, in some cases, a sort of very early stage in the life of an MVP, we've been able to see that good, effective engagement with women from these groups can make a really huge difference in terms of the way that their voices are understood, their experiences are understood and responded to, and can lead to very concrete changes in the way that services are set up to meet their needs. As part of that, making sure that we can hear more of those voices and act accordingly based on the expertise that they can offer is going to be a really central part of this work. And doing that in a trauma-informed way, both in terms of the work that is done through MVPs, but also in terms of allowing a trauma-informed and a trauma-responsive approach to be embedded across maternity systems, will make a huge difference for every woman, regardless of whether she has personal experience of trauma or not. But for those women who do have very acute experiences of trauma, and whose trauma will have a huge impact on the way that they access and respond to services, embedding that approach is going to make a huge difference. I'm going to hand on to Kay now, who I know is going to talk about where North Central London are sort of going in response to these recommendations, and the work that we're already getting to grips with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that is very reassuring is that North Central London LMS, we've already established a leading role on improving care for women experiencing multiple disadvantage. We know that excellent care is being given to many women through trust level continuity of care pathways and specialist midwifery services, and we are very proud of this. And we're fortunate to have some wonderful clinical staff, some very committed staff out there, and very committed service users who are really trying to help drive this. However, this project really demonstrates the need for stronger coordination across the whole of our NCL LMS in response to the multiple disadvantage, and for stronger involvement of women with lived experience. So what are we doing? One of the things that we've developed over the time that we've been doing the maternity transformation, we've had various different work streams focusing on particular areas. And prior to COVID, but particularly highlighted through our pandemic experience and some of the reports that have been produced during that time, we realized that actually we needed to have a focus on this group of women. So we've developed a group. We've morphed our groups is probably the best way of putting it. And our new group is called Women Living with Multiple Disadvantages. And this includes our BAME and vulnerable women. The group includes our MVP chairs. We have midwives, obstetricians, commissioners. We have representatives from the voluntary sector, GP and public health involvement in this. And initially, the first thing we're trying to work together on is achieving the 4 BAME COVID metrics that were identified by NHSE in response to the COVID pandemic. And it really highlighted, as Kate and Kirsty have pointed out, the inequity across the patch, that with health outcomes, our Black, Asian, minority ethnic women and more disadvantaged were already at an increased disadvantage, and this was played out even more through the pandemic. So we were set 4 targets that we need to reach, and first and foremost, our that's what our group will be focusing on. We want to take a staged approach to this, so focusing on each different area, developing NCL-wide guidance and metrics, and that's very, very important. What we don't want to see is each area is doing their own thing, each trust is doing their own thing. We really need to be working across the patch. And as we develop our areas, we need to be evaluating them. So everything that we're doing, going back, evaluating, is this working? Do we need to tweak it? Then we want to turn our attention to other issues affecting this group of women and families. And we'll be drawing in additional members of the community in different professions. As part of the Maternity Transformation Programme, we have a deliverable that at least 35% of all Black and Asian women and at least 35% of all women from the most deprived 10% of areas booked for maternity care must be placed onto continuity of care pathways by March 2021. And this work stream is going to play a significant part in this. And this is something that we have been building on. Although the pandemic changed quite a bit of things that were happening, much of this work is carried on in the background, and we're very committed to making sure that we do this. It feeds back to some of my earlier points in the introduction, that women expressed a preference to have a midwife, build up a relationship with that midwife, and know the midwife throughout. And this is very important for outcomes. I think what we must also remember, and I've been a midwife a lot of years, so I'm as guilty of this as everybody else. Maternity doesn't sit in isolation. And sometimes we can be inclined to think of it that it does, but it doesn't. It gives us a huge opportunity. Women will access healthcare, they'll access different services during pregnancy that otherwise they may not present. And actually, this is a time for us to make sure that we are giving the best care, that we can direct them to the best sort of care, that we can really make a difference in their outcomes. But to do that, we have to work with the women, with public health, with children's services, with primary care, with mental health services, and our voluntary sectors, if we are to effect real change. We've mentioned as well that we've obviously been putting in a lot of effort to try and develop our MVPs, and this is well underway. And we do have a significant commitment to this work from the chairs, from the commissioners, from our clinical teams. One of the best things I think that came about through COVID was we developed regular fortnightly meetings between our heads of midwifery, the MVP chairs, myself as the commissioner, and Kaz as the transformation lead. And these fortnightly meetings, we discussed issues, we discussed the various challenges, and believe me, there have been some. And getting together and working collaboratively, it's helped us build relationships. It's helped us plan the communications, how we're going to do things. And actually, the wealth of information that we've got has been tremendous. That is something that we're carrying on. And I have to thank Kate and Kirsty for the work that they've done, because really that helped to cement that sort of relationship. We sit around the table, or we don't actually, we sit around a screen these days, but we sit there and we get a chance to really discuss things openly and frankly. Now, while we have our 4 established MVPs, I acknowledge the amount of time and support needed to create them was underestimated. We need to build on this project now to develop training, and not only for our MVP lay users, but also for our clinical staff. This is quite a new concept. You know, in the scheme of a few years, this is something different. It's a different way of working, and we have to give people the tools to do that. And to do that, there is training that we are funding, and that's taking place in the early part of next year. And we're also looking at how we can establish more reliable and sustainable means of funding to keep our MVPs working well, to make sure that they're remunerated, and so that this good work can carry on. We want to build on this project from Birth Companions, This would give the LMS the tools to invest appropriately in effective co-produced and trauma-informed pathways for the women who are facing multiple disadvantage. By embedding a comprehensive evidence-led response, we can consolidate our position and we can build on it. But this is a team approach. We can't do it alone. And we really need to hear your views, your ideas. We welcome your input. If it's something that you might like to be involved in, please let Kaz and I know. If you're wanting to be involved in a group, we welcome everybody. Please come along, help us make a huge difference. And I'm going to hand back over to Kirsty. I think it is either Kirsty or Kate who's now going to carry on with the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kay. Yes, we've got lots of time because we felt it was incredibly important that after sharing some of the work that we've been doing and some of the recommendations that led us towards, that we could also then hear your responses to that work and answer any questions as well that you might have. I've been busy sharing slides, and that has meant that I haven't been able to see the chat at all, but I'm going to try and catch up on it now. I think there were a couple that Kaz had identified already. So Kaz, do you mind picking out the first few, and then I will try and catch up on the chat, which is looking quite busy, I can see.
No problem at all. I've been collecting the questions that have been coming through. There's quite a lot of comments as well, and I think what would be nice would be to do some sort of report alongside the webinar when we post that, just to say some of the comments that have come back, because it's very nice to hear positive things as well. So if I just quickly go through, so if I go through in order where they've had, there was a question from Anna Horn saying, Kirsty, you mentioned that during this time in a woman's life there is an appetite for positive change. Are you able to speak a bit more about how a strengths-based approach to working with women with multiple disadvantage has helped them to see the positive changes they'd wish to see? So that's the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to take that one first. Naomi and Kate, do jump in if there's things that you want to add. I mean, I couldn't agree more. We absolutely see really incredible levels of engagement from women that actually in most other services and spaces and organisations are sort of lumped into this hard to reach category or hard to engage, and while there are definitely huge barriers to women engaging, we would sort of take issue with those labels based on our experience, because time and again we see that through Birth Companions' commitment to working in a trauma-informed, women-centred way, and engaging with women on the basis of their pregnancy and the basis of their role as a mother or a mother-to-be, we sort of unlock an appetite for change, a kind of positivity, and definitely a huge range of strengths that many other systems and services, I think, don't always see or don't as readily see in these women. Sometimes that's because judgments are clouded by bias, conscious or unconscious bias, about the way that the point that women have reached in their lives and the things that they've seen or the things that are going on. And I think we and you know, many of the midwives working in this area see that by sort of putting all of that to one side and relating to a woman first and foremost as a pregnant woman and a mother, a lot of that can be sort of cut through, and so I think a strengths-based approach is absolutely crucial, because there is huge strength and huge positivity within the women that we work with, and the effects of tapping into that are incredible. So I couldn't agree more that has to be central to specialist pathways, for instance, particularly working with women who might be at risk of social services involvement, or who already have social services involved in their care and often don't have the benefit of a strengths-based approach in the work that's being done with them currently. Naomi, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also that I think that the work of our lived experience team is also testament to the amazing potential that women embody. You know, these are all women who have either been through our services or have experienced real challenges during pregnancy and early motherhood, and they are now giving back in a hugely influential and expert way to try and improve care that other women experience. And you know, they are an amazing resource. So I think, if anything, demonstrates women's strengths and the power of a strength-based approach. It's the lived experience team.
Okay. I noticed there's a question in the chat for Kate. Can you please explain how you measured multiple disadvantage when trying to increase participation in the MVPs? Kate, do you want to respond to that one?
Hi, yes. So I think that the answer is that the women that attended all of the MVP work with me were all members of the lived experience team. Now, members of this team are all women who have been supported, or the vast majority have been supported by birth companions. So as such, they were supported by us at a time in their life where they were facing incredible challenges and in the perinatal period. And so it was those women that came along with us. And I think if you're talking about sort of how we measure that, maybe Naomi or Kirsty, you can talk a bit more about how, you know, how we do that in general at Birth Companions.
Yeah, I mean, as I touched upon briefly before, in terms of defining multiple disadvantage, Birth Companions uses a list of factors that might be included in disadvantage that is generally more comprehensive than most. I think in a lot of areas, multiple disadvantage tends to focus on various combinations of 3 or 4 exemplar factors. They tend to be, depending on the space that you're working in, criminal justice involvement, mental health issues, substance misuse and domestic abuse. In other areas, they can include adverse childhood experiences, but they tend to be limited to 3 or 4 factors. Our list is much longer than that. And I think so we benchmark multiple disadvantage as the co-occurrence of any 3 of those factors, acknowledging the fact that there can be and often is many more than 3 at play in a woman's life. We also advocate for including historical factors, so factors that might not be sort of currently affecting a woman's life in a day-to-day sense, but adverse childhood experiences, experience of trauma that may not be ongoing, but will definitely have an impact on a woman's response to other things in her life, and certainly, you know, big shifts like pregnancy and the shift into motherhood can re-trigger those. So it's a fuller definition than is used in other places. The fullness of that definition can make it very difficult to get to grips with, and I think, as always, it's by honing in on the way that plays out in an individual woman's life, and sort of real life examples, and tapping into the experiences that are represented in our lived experience team brings that to, you know, to a level that is much easier to engage with and understand. I think another part of thinking about multiple disadvantage for us is remaining aware of the fact that those factors can change at any point in a woman's life. So the fact that there might be a change in her mental health needs, for instance, might then have a huge impact on the way that other factors play out, or the way that she can respond to other factors. Equally, housing, for instance, you know, if housing is suddenly withdrawn, or a woman has to move at short notice to a new area, the way that that intersects with other factors of disadvantage in her life at the same time can be very, very significant. I just thought I'd pick up, I just noticed in the chat that there was a point made about the language that we use in terms of defining women as disadvantaged or vulnerable, and how women respond to that. And I think that's a really important point. At Birth Companions, we don't tend to talk about women as vulnerable unless we're sort of directly responding to someone who is using that language with us. We also focus much more on the fact that women might be experiencing disadvantage rather than that they are disadvantaged. And I think there's lines that run throughout all of that language, and the sort of mindfulness that we've just talked about around adopting strengths-based approaches and treating women as, you know, people with agency, with their own life experience, but their own capacity to change and capacity to work with others. Kate.
Hi, sorry, I was frantically waving because I was desperate to come in on this one, because when we set up the lived experience team, one of the first things that we wanted to do was to talk about language and to have that conversation with women. And it was just amazing to be able to sit around the table and just talk about that. And some of what they said is definitely reflected in what you just spoke about. But it was about not being labelled. It was about the fact that not to talk about not to describe them, but to describe their situation. So, for example, the women that we had in the lived experience team meeting that day were really unhappy with the word vulnerable, because they felt that it somehow negatively impacted on them, that it was about them rather than the situation that they landed them, that they had ended in. So things like faced challenges was something that women were really keen on, because they said it was movable. It described their situation rather than them. It was about the situation they'd found themselves in. So if we're talking about facing multiple challenges, facing multiple disadvantages, those were generally phrases that the women we spoke to that day were happy with. And the ones that they weren't happy with were the descriptive ones, were the ones that they felt you know, impacted on them, like, you know, negatively, like vulnerable, because they actually did not see themselves as vulnerable. They saw themselves as women that had ended up in a situation where they needed extra support because they were facing, you know, lots of challenges in the perinatal period. So it was really important for us at the beginning to kind of have that conversation with women. So I hope that's helpful for you.
Okay, we've got a question from Mary Newburn, who says, will Birth Companions be offering trauma-informed training going forward? If so, to whom, MVPs and professionals working in this service, and funded how? She said, as Kirsty knows, I'm very interested in intermediary roles. Navigator roles seem to have some similarities. Useful to discuss these kinds of roles more, I feel. Perhaps things might come up in further discussion.
Hey, sorry, Kaz. Did you direct that at me? I think
she was out saying, will Birth Companions be offering trauma-informed training? So whoever would like to answer that. Yeah.
Kirsty, did you want to come in and then I shall? Yes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes, as Kate mentioned in talking about the project, you know, Kate delivered a trauma-informed training session as part of her work with the MVPs. It's something that we offer, you know, we can offer very widely depending on who wants it and what they want it to focus on. So it's definitely something that we're able to help, and it's, you know, it's absolutely central to the work that we do, and we can involve members of our lived experience team in that work as well. Naomi, do you want to add anything more on that?
Well, only to say that Kate was actually working with one of the midwifery team in North Central on developing some trauma-informed training for midwives. So I think, you know, that particular project has been impacted by COVID, but I'm really hoping that can be, you know, resurrected and taken forward.
And I think it's, you know, as we said, COVID has messed up quite an awful lot of things, really. But we did allocate funding for various types of training. And following on from this report, we identified funding from this tranche of funding, that's the maternity transformation funding that's come out, because we were aware of the fact that there would be findings from this that we would want to develop, and we would want to take things further. So that's certainly something that we would be looking at, and that would probably sit more with the group that I described just at the end of the presentations, sit with that work stream to see, okay, how do we build this in? So yes, it's certainly not a case of we won't be doing anything more with this. Obviously, funding is always challenging, but when we see that there are huge benefits, which there are, then we prioritise. So, and we look forward to working more with birth companions anyway.
May I just make a sort of further comment? It just sort of strikes me that both for health professionals and for the MVP network, and obviously MVPs include health professionals, but it's not the main way that health professionals do their training. It just sort of strikes me that just as you were saying that you've been working with the Royal Colleges on their briefing on the importance of raising awareness and focusing on women with who are experiencing social disadvantage, that the trauma-informed training, it just strikes me, you know, really helpful for MVPs, but MVPs nationally. And I don't know, I'm not a health professional, but I'm not aware that it's a sort of core standard part of training, nor is it part. I mean, I'm on the stakeholder council for the maternity transformation programme, and it's not a term that I have heard discussed there. So I think there's huge potential, and I'm, you know, interested that you got specific funding to do that piece of work. And I think there's such a lot of pieces of work that can be valuable in developing these this awareness and the interventions that might be necessary. And it's been so valuable to hear about the way that you brought your values to the work with the MVP chairs that you've had in working with the women with lived experience. As a lot of people on the call will know, that the MVPs are underfunded and there's a sort of huge expectation on them, but it's been very difficult to break that deadlock. And I think this project, which sort of comes into the middle, might be quite helpful in breaking that deadlock, because it's very easy to go round and round in circles, that the MVPs are not representative enough, they don't include enough people, but they need to do more outreach. But how do they do that when they're funded on an absolute shoestring and there isn't training? And I see this as really important. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary.
Can I just sort of follow up Mary's really helpful comments? In two areas. I think absolutely you're right to identify you know, the need for more work, more investment and more consideration about the work of MVPs across the country. And the second thing is the recognition of the trauma-informed approach, which up until, you know, this year, I think even, you know, wasn't a term that was widely understood or used in maternity circles. It's been an approach which has been used very widely and successfully in services that work directly with people who a high proportion of them experience trauma. So within the criminal justice system, within drug and alcohol services, for example, it's very widely used and recognised. It's now, I'm really pleased, after having kind of been a cheerleader for this with maternity services for many years now, it is gradually becoming better known and better embraced, and I think a lot of people are very excited about the potential of a trauma-informed approach and a trauma-responsive approach within maternity services. NHS England are due at some point, and I hope it's going to come this year or early next year, to publish guidelines for maternity services to implement a trauma-informed approach. I think that will be incredibly helpful to have that as a sort of a national standard and a roadmap. I think the important thing to say about trauma-informed is that it is an approach which has so much value, not just for women experiencing challenges, experiencing trauma, or with life course experience of trauma. It is a universal approach which will improve not just the care of all the women who access maternity services, but also the staff. It's a workforce approach as well, because it recognises the needs of staff as well. I'm not going to bang on about trauma-informed anymore in this forum, but I would urge everybody, if you don't know about trauma-informed care, to start exploring it, because I really think it has a huge transformational potential with maternity.
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of other points that have come up in the chat, Kaz. I hope you don't mind me jumping in. I've just been sort of catching up on discussions. I think there's two areas that'd be helpful to have a brief discussion around. There's been a few questions about 15 steps program. So Kate, I wonder if in a minute you could do a little summary of what the 15 steps program is and how it worked in practice in the sessions that you were involved in, and the sort of outcomes of that, because I think that might be helpful. I just want to, before you do that, to pick up on a few points that have been made about support for women who are having babies removed into care or being separated from babies. That's an issue that's incredibly close to our hearts at Birth Companions. From the outset of our services, when they were first set up in Holloway Prison, we were doing a lot of work with women who were going to be separated from their babies and had been separated from their babies. That's almost 25 years ago, and we know that in the last 5 to 10 years, the number of newborns being removed into care is rocketing. Is actually doubled. So we see a lot of women who are either at risk of having babies removed or have had babies removed, and we provide specialist support for women at the point of removal, as well as before and after. The comments in the chat sort of reflect what we know, which is that very often postnatal support for women who've had babies removed into care falls away very, very sharply, and they're sort of no longer recognised or supported as mothers once those babies have been removed. And there's a lot of very compelling research around the fact that that can have hugely damaging consequences for those women, and there's evidence that it leads to repeat pregnancies and repeat removals, which is obviously a cycle of disadvantage in and of itself. Kathy, I think you might have comments to share on this, but just to sort of flag up that that's one of the areas that we looked at in our Holding It All Together research with birth rights, and in other parts of our work. So it's very central, and I think that the points that we've made about specialist pathways, specialist care pathways, and very sort of focused efforts, particularly apply to that group in some ways more than any other, because at the moment the support there is very, very patchy and very short-lived. I think I saw a hand fly up at one moment, but it might have gone. But Kate, sorry, Kathy, yes, are you ready do you want to share something about separation?
Perfect, thank you. I think from an NCL perspective, thank you everybody, wonderful session. I think, Kate, we need to put some pressure, but we need to have a discussion with our NCL perinatal mental health team. Currently, if a baby is taken into care, and we know from the confidential inquiries, these women are more likely to commit suicide. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And Kirsty has talked about the cycle, they lead to more babies going into care. More than ever, I can't see any logic, any thinking, any compassion, anything in withdrawing perinatal mental health support to these women at the time the baby is removed. And I don't know why this has not been flagged up before, and I don't know why we're discussing this morning again.
I think, very valid points, Kathy. I think the most positive way that I can say about this is this work has highlighted these issues again. And actually, there is a far greater focus on perinatal mental health at the moment anyway. So it's quite timely to be tying in all of these issues together. The discussion after the presentation is particularly helpful because this is what we wanted. We wanted to get different views and different suggestions. So yes, any ideas we will be following up and taking them forward. But absolutely agreed.
Thank you.
And just very briefly to add to that, I think there's a need to focus in on the needs of women whose babies are being permanently removed into care, and those are very specific set of needs. There's also a need to recognise the fact that there are many women who, because of their contact with various systems, might have a temporary separation from their babies very shortly after birth, particularly women who are in the criminal justice system and who are in prison. And the temporary nature of those separations and the uncertainty around how long those separations might continue also needs very careful consideration as well, because those are very specific sets of experiences, but the consequences can be incredibly profound. Logan, I think you just popped your hand up then as well. Did you want to add something there?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a brilliant morning and all the hard work that everybody's been done. It's just to share really our experience with setting up a case loading team for highly vulnerable women as an early adopter site. And one of the huge lessons we learned was the time needed for these families. And I think it's something that we can underestimate when we are trying to think about teams around the women. The reality is there's so much additional work that you take on apart from what you're doing as a midwife or as a social worker, etc. One of the things that was really good was the fact that the caseloads were smaller, so the midwives could really follow through with some of the kind of more complex care that the women needed. So I think that if we're going to do something that's really meaningful to women, I think we need to think about the time and effort it takes. I don't think we've calculated, and we tried, the actual amount of time it takes midwives to care for very complex, multi-layered issues with women. So it's just I'd like to make that as a recommendation, is to think about that as well. Yeah, thank you.
Kate, did you want to talk about 15 steps in a little bit more detail?
Yes, sure. Just to talk a little bit about the 15 Steps programme, I hope I do this justice, the MVP chairs that are listening. So the 15 Steps programme was born out of service user feedback of a woman who took her child to hospital and had to have intensive treatment. And she said that within 15 steps of walking onto a ward, she knew the type of care her child would get. So that was the starting point. So it's been rolled out as a programme so that the intention is that you go onto the wards and the maternity areas and you do a kind of like a walkthrough. So this would be service users, members of the MVP, hospital members. So it's a broad group of people, and you walk in small groups into the different areas. And we have information to get you to sort of think about what to record. And you basically look around you, and you look and you think, how would I feel if I was pregnant and I was arriving here, did I find my way here okay? What's the atmosphere like? Are the signs clear? What information is around? Like, is there information about MVPs? It's a kind of a sort of a snapshot of, you sort of take a step back and you think, what's it like? What's it like walking in here today? How does it make me feel? So all of this is recorded, and then everyone gets back together and has a really good discussion about things that they found. And what was amazing at the Whittington was that Ros did this quick wins, which was, okay, so these are the things that we've all seen that we think need to change. What can we do today? What can we do right now? What are our quick wins? And then enlisting the help of the hospital staff that are there in the meeting to kind of get some things changed today, and then think about those wider issues and things that are going to take more time, and making sure that they are going to the right person, and they can be they can think about how to make those changes. So it's really review what's going on, think and feel and listen to what's going on in those wards, and provide that feedback, and see some changes, what needs to change, and how can we get those changes to happen. So I think that's it in a very quick roundup.
Brilliant, thank you. Logan, I think you popped your hand up there.
Sorry, legendary, I'll take it down.
Oh, no problem. I'm just trying to catch up on other things that I haven't covered. Kaz, if you can jump in with anything that has come up on the chat that I haven't picked up on yet. Just before you do that, I just wanted to share something that Birth Companions is currently doing, because we've just touched briefly on women affected by the criminal justice system. We're doing a piece of research at the moment in partnership with Clinks, which is a membership body for criminal justice charities, and we're trying to understand more about the experiences of pregnant women and women who have recently given birth who are serving community-based sentences, and women who are under probation supervision after leaving prison. And as part of that, there's a specific online survey for midwives who have experience of working with women in those situations. So I'm going to share the link in the chat box. If any of you have direct experience of doing that work, please fill out the survey. But if you can share with colleagues as well, we would really appreciate it. Just a shameless plug before I hand on to Kaz to flag up anything that we haven't picked up on yet.
I think we've sort of reached the end of our time as well, so we just need to wrap up really. So what I'll do is we will be going through all of the questions and comments, etc. So we will put something together to support the discussions we've had today. So I'll just hand over to Kate. Do you just want to do some final words? Yeah.
Just really to say thank you so much for everyone who's attended and participated. This was exactly what we wanted. We've got some fantastic comments there in the comment box. We've had some really good discussions, and we've captured the points. And one of the blessings of doing it this way is it's recorded, so we can actually play it back and capture everything. As I said before, you know, the work that has been done by Birth Companions is incredible, and we are absolutely blessed to have been able to work with them again. And so I send out my huge thanks, looking forward to continuing working. This is not the end of things. This is just another step on the way. So my thanks particularly obviously go to Naomi, Kirsty and Kate. Huge thanks, Kaz sitting there beavering away with the technology. And we look forward to working with you all and hearing from you in future. Take care and stay safe. We keep saying stay safe, but do. Thank you very, very much.